Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, a Pittsburgh Steelers podcast made by fans like you, for fans like you. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final special edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. This special edition is detailing the 2016 NFL Draft. It's not going to be the last time I talk about these draft picks. Obviously, there's going to be slow news until we get to the mini camps and all of the training camps and preseason activities. But this is going to be probably my main focus is going to be here on the overall picture of the 2016 draft, this whole draft weekend, and how that's going to look for the Steelers' outlook for the season. I mean, this was, in my opinion, and I know I love seeing some of the people who actually admit that they're biased. I'm biased, man. I love my team. I'm thinking, always going to give them an A grade no matter what they do, even if they draft guys who don't end up making the team or end up being much of anything. The Shaquille Richardsons or Gerard Hollemans or Rob Blanchflowers, for that matter. If you remember any of those names, there's probably a reason why you might not. So the Steelers, the 2016 draft for Kevin Colbert and company here, just basically a defensive draft. And it's not surprising. And I read a little snippet somewhere that said, they're rebuilding the Steelers defense and the defense coming off one of the worst statistical seasons in nearly a quarter century. But despite that fact, when you look at maybe what they did, they were 30th against the pass. They were, where were they in the rushing? They were somewhere in the middle of the pack. I want to say 15th. I have them listed as 21st overall when it comes to team defense, and everyone just keeps looking at that. And this is a team that was maybe a fumble away from being in the AFC Championship. And when you think about 30th pass defense, how did they get there? By being so bad, by being a team that was 30th in giving up first downs by passing. And I ragged on Antoine Blake, but he's going to be he's a big point to make here when a player gives up roughly a quarter of your passing yards. I think he gave up even more than that. It was over 1,000 yards attributed to him. I mean, I go back to that Cleveland Browns game at the very end of the season and watching Terrell Pryor get like a 35, 40-yard catch. I don't even know that. It might have been Terrell Pryor's first NFL catch or second NFL catch. You can't even cover a guy who's never caught a ball in the NFL from a third-string quarterback, Austin Davis, throwing the rock over that in that direction. It was just like, hey, let's throw it towards 41. And I think Pro Football Focus also had a statistic, and I had placed it over on the blog over at steelcityunderground.com at some point, that there wasn't a whole lot to fix in the secondary. I mean, you can't get much worse than Pro Football Focus saying Antoine Blake not only having like an NFL like record worst as far as a defensive back giving up yards attributed to one player, but he also missed something like a record 28 tackles or something incredibly ridiculous. And it's kind of silly to think because I really liked Blake. I was high on him. I nearly did like a little puff piece on him during last year's preseason, thinking he might be an unsung hero. He reminded me, did I just say he hit like a truck? He reminded me of like Ryan Clark, except as a corner. So, but he was undersized. I mean, he did get waived by the Jacksonville Jaguars. So this is a guy that you picked up. And now ship has sailed. And same thing, Cortez Allen, big contract, cut, gone, out of there. So Will Allen, a safety, I still think maybe there might be a place for Will Allen to get maybe a 1 or 2 year deal. I don't expect him to play out 2 years if he does get a contract of that length, but it's one of those maybe thank you, near veteran minimum type things, just to add another veteran with the safeties, because I was quite surprised, and Twitter was quite a buzz yesterday after the draft of all let's go out and sign all these different players. You could sign probably about 10 players that are undrafted free agents now that nobody ended up drafting. And Jeremy Cash was one of these players from Duke. He was safety. He was like was he the ACC Defensive Player of the Year, or he was close in that running. And nobody took him. And as I'm going through like Twitter and Facebook and I'm looking at everyone's comments, I saw Dolphins fans, Texans fans, Cowboys fans, Titans fans, Browns fans, Bills fans. I mean, just everybody. Like, it was like I'm going through this news feed, and everybody is like, "Hey, we want this guy." And well, the Steelers, they did pick up some undrafted free agents. I'm not going to speak about them today. It's usually, I'm not going to say it's a long shot, because as I've been touting, Kevin Colbert and the front office's draft record, and even finding players like a Ramon Foster, or, James Harrison, right? Willie Parker, these guys that were undrafted players, and they end up making the team. So it's a long shot, but it's not impossible. But today's focus really is on the Steelers going with, let's see, their top 3 picks and 5 of their 7 overall draft picks are all on the defense. So they only take two picks that are offense, and we're going to focus on. Everybody's saying about the worst statistical season. So how is a team that close to making AFC Championship and even the Super Bowl? Okay, some help from Vontaze Burfict and Pac-Man Jones, of course, in their first playoff game. So they get in a position to win, and then there's a dogfight. But, I mean, they almost beat the Denver Broncos, the Super Bowl champions, a fumble away. And they get there because despite being 30th in first downs by passing, they're 3rd in the league when it came to first downs by rushing. So on 3rd down, pretty much teams were just going to pass the ball. And it kind of becomes just a logical choice, some common sense as you watch film and the teams prepare their game plans towards the end of the year. So it's not necessarily that the teams were going to rush on 3rd down, because they already knew it was a statistical improbability against what was a porous secondary, okay? But given that, even, the Steelers were only 11th in points allowed. That's fairly impressive. So they're in the top 3rd of the league. Pretty cool. They're 4th in fumbles recovered, 6th in interceptions, and tied 3rd overall in total takeaways. Wow. So that now, if the light bulb isn't going off and you're taking that 3rd overall in takeaways, and also 3rd in the league with 48 sacks, they were only 1 behind New England, who was 2nd, and then Carolina had 52. So Carolina only had 4 more sacks, and Carolina was thought to have this really, really strong defense, and they did. I don't want to say thought. They did. They had a good defense last year, so did the Denver Broncos, and they led the league in takeaways. So if you link what the Steelers were doing in the draft, and you take a look at what those players, highly productive players, are doing in college, these are the type of players they're going after. They're going after great quality players. They're going after players with some speed, some strength, and guys that produce, even in the later rounds. So you take a look at the 5 picks that were made on the defensive side of the ball. Of course, first round pick and a whole dedicated podcast just to Artie Burns, cornerback out of Miami of Florida. You have Sean Davis, who is a cornerback, but converted cornerback, will likely play safety. I think, well, I'll get back to what I think about Davis here in a second. Javon Hargrave, defensive lineman, can play nose tackle. Travis Feeney, linebacker, 6th round pick, and then Tyler Matakevich, a linebacker from Temple, in the 7th round. And all those players are highly productive players. You have Artie Burns, who led the ACC in interceptions. Sean Davis is one of the top tacklers in Maryland history. I talked about him on one of our podcasts the other day leading into day 3's draft. And then you have Javon Hargraves, who is just a monster of a defensive lineman, despite being at like the 1AA or FCS level, FBS level. Geez, I hate that. Can we go back to the 1AA thing, guys? That's just the way I always saw it. 1A and 1AA. I remember when there was 1 AAA too, but hey, to each their own. So Hargraves, one sort of a level and a half behind a Division I, 37.5 career sacks. And you know what? Some of them, they're playing, these smaller schools, even like South Carolina State, they are playing. Some of these schools are really good. I mean, you look at Carson Wentz come out of North Dakota State for, what else are you going to say about that? Small school. So, but I've already been on that. I'm not going to be a broken record. So we'll talk about Travis Feeney here, who is 3rd in the Pac-12 in sacks and 3rd on his Washington defense in tackles for loss. So he's also very highly productive. And then Matakevich is Temple's all-time leading tackler. Do you see a theme here? These guys, I said highly productive, but what does productive mean? You got Burns leading interceptions. The kid is a track athlete. He is a strong character guy. And this is what they're looking for. And like I said the other day, I think I said it to somebody on Twitter, and for those of you who are pro wrestling fans too, if you've probably heard, and you can't teach that. And you can't teach a DB to be this ball hawk and basically be a wide receiver. You look at all the times that Ike Taylor had hands of stone, and you think maybe if Artie Burns is even, 3/4 as good as Ike Taylor was in his prime and can catch the ball, what a difference that's going to make on the Steelers' defense. I think Burns is going to find himself maybe working himself in as a rotation, almost like Antoine Blake and Ross Cockrell did. So it really depends on how Ross Cockrell plays this year, and we have him for a year. And that's not to say Ross Cockrell might not be a strong player, and maybe Ross Cockrell was a guy that we actually looked at drafting and we looked past, and we got a second shot on him. So the Steelers are still high on him. It just depends if he'll be here for the long term. Obviously, Artie Burns is someone we're invested in as a first-round draft choice, looking at being here for the long term. So think of it in that direction. Unless it blows up in his face, we're hitching the saddles to Artie Burns. Okay. I think Sean Davis is a day one starter. I've already been on record saying that. A lot of people think I'm nuts. This guy is just off the charts with the measurables. I think we got a heck of a steal at safety. Probably the second or third best safety on the board. I mean, period. Behind what we were thinking, Carl Joseph and Keanu Neal. So definitely Davis is up there. And you have to think, will these rookies play? And Mike Tomlin's not against these rookies playing. I mean, it's pretty exciting when you think about it. You have Sean Davis, who I'm saying could be a day one starter. We still have Robert Golden, but we did play some packages where we had 3 safeties on the field. That's why I think Will Allen will still find a spot on this team. But Sean Davis, who I think would be a day one starter, and then you have our maybe nickel type rotation with Senquez Golson, who's meant to be that Brandon Boykin type role, even though Boykin didn't really come through for the Steelers. So there's a guy that hasn't played in a regular season game. And could you also throw Artie Burns out there? And a lot of people, that might scare everybody. The Steelers have always been a traditional, at least under Dick LeBeau, had traditionally been a team where rookies, first year, second year players didn't see a lot of action. Look how long it took Cam Hayward to come on the field. A lot of people called Cam Hayward a bust. And I said, give it some time. The guy hasn't even been on the field yet. He gets on the field, what is he? He's one of the most, if not the most valuable player on that defense right now. Am I right? Definitely. So, it's not like that anymore. Bud Dupree started 5 games last year as a rookie. And Shazier started 5 as well as a rookie. And if he wouldn't have been hurt, he would have started even more. He played 12 games last year as a starter. He would have played even more than 12 had he not been hurt as well. So it's pretty exciting when you think about that the Steelers, if they don't play their base 3-4, might have 3 guys in the secondary that are all basically first-year players. And that's also scary at the same time, but can it be any worse than being 30th in pass defense and giving up all those first downs? You got a guy that is a tackling machine playing as a safety now. I love that. And he's fast. Not the fastest, but Artie Burns is. They're not just going to heave a ball over the top like they did on Cortez Allen or Antoine Blake. That option is not going to be there anymore. The only knock on Artie Burns is maybe his tackling. Going to have to work on that. That new collective bargaining deal that went in a few years ago, you have even less contact now during these, during practice during the year. So you see a lot of teams are really bad at tackling in September. Even Bill Belichick, got to respect him for what he's done as a coach in his tenure. And he's even said September is just an extension of training camp. And you see it. There's some ugly football in September. And that's just a byproduct of trying to save these guys' bodies, concussion lawsuits, things of that nature. So what do the Steelers go out and do? They get guys who are among the school's best at tackling and producing. It makes absolute sense. Game-ready players, because our philosophy now is we can't be any worse than we already were. So let's get these guys on the field and be good now. And we will improve. And if you already take that we won't be any worse than 30th, and you draw that line, And you're not going to go, that's your floor. You have a very high ceiling to be above that. I love it. Javon Hargraves. And I'm talking all defense, but hey, 5 of the picks on defense. I actually liked the picks yesterday. And for those of you who were able to tune in, I had 15 live broadcasts from the Steelers fan blitz. They open up Heinz Field. They allow the fans to go in there from noon to 6 on day 3 of the draft. And I was able to do some live streams from Periscope, and we were talking with Tunch Ilkin there, who was on the podium, and they were waiting, and they allow the fans to make the pick. And it was pretty cool, even though it didn't get aired, at least on NFL Network that I saw. But I got the 6th and the first 7th round pick before they closed up shop, and we were able to live stream it. So you can go back and look at that. And Tunch was saying, hey, we need backers. And this defense needs backers. So when they go after somebody like Feeney, who maybe doesn't seem like somebody that would be a fit, he's more of a 4-3 guy. They're looking for productive athletes and seeing where they can put them in the system. And then Matakevich, the guy's got a motor. You never know. These 7th round picks sometimes, 6th and 7th round picks, really pan out to be the best players. Antonio Brown, Kelvin Beachum, Brett Kiesel. You look at picks like that, they could even be here longer than the mid-round picks. But Javon Hargraves, 3rd round pick, and I said I was very excited about him. And the Steelers defensive line coach comes out and he has the press conference, and he's saying, no, he's a 3-down player. And that was really the knock, I think, on Andrew Billings and hearing about his knee being hurt. And I hope that doesn't hurt the Steelers. I was really curious to see if we would have took Gerald Hawkins in the 4th round, if Billings wouldn't have went 1 pick before with the Bengals. And everybody I know most of us that were high on Billings, myself included, kind of sighed. There was just that groan, oh, he went to the Bengals. Hey, you know what? If he's a bust for them, take a flyer, right? That's what I was saying even in the 3rd round. Take a flyer on the guy. But they wanted Hargraves. And they wanted Hargraves because they really lobbied. They really felt this is the guy, okay? And this guy can play all 3 downs, and they could even put him in for Hayward or Tuitt and play him like over a guard with those 2 front down linemen when we play with the extra DBs out there. So it's very exciting to think. And we still have Big Dan McCullers, one of the largest athletes in the NFL, if not the largest athlete in the NFL, that could still go over the nose. They could put all 4 of these guys on the line too. There's a lot of hybrid looks that the Steelers could work with. Very exciting to see with Hargraves. But before I close out today's podcast, I would be remiss to not mention the other 2 picks in day 3 of the NFL draft. And I already have one podcast out talking about Gerald Hawkins. And Gerald Hawkins is somebody who could play swing tackle. He was a he was a right tackle first, redshirt freshman. And he had 37 career starts. And then he moved to left tackle last year at LSU, replacing very, very high, big prospect Lyle Collins. And if you remember, he fell from grace in last year's NFL draft, didn't even get drafted. Some bad news that come out about a day or 2 before the draft that killed his draft stock and cost him millions of dollars. But it doesn't take away from what that kid was. And you take a look at Hawkins, who many said needed another year of college. He's going to get that education with the Steelers now. So I'm very, very excited about this kid's upside. And then DeMarcus Ayers, and a lot of people said, why are we taking this wide receiver in the 7th round? And this kind of goes back to even picks like Feeney or Matakevich. Do we really think that if Feeney and Matakevich make the roster, do we really see them being on the defense, on the field, on the defensive side of the ball a lot, if at all? I mean, a 6th round pick, Anthony Chiquillo, was only out there for a handful of snaps. I think he dressed like 5 games last year. And he was outside linebacker. So, I mean, it all depends on like injuries and who's healthy. And you never know if these guys produce. But you're looking at guys who are tackle machines that could contribute to special teams. And that's where DeMarcus Ayers comes in. And they pretty much said it. He was our top kick returner that was on the board. So this goes over to the special teams coach, lobbying and getting his guy. And why not? 7th rounder. You saw what happened when AB got hurt against the Broncos. And Wheaton fumbles the ball and we get field position cost us. And those are these little things in this game that could have swayed this to the Steelers being in the AFC Championship. So just like the year before when the Steelers go out in free agency and get D'Angelo Williams as a backup to Le'Veon Bell, we didn't have like a plan B for Antonio Brown not returning punts. And of course, being a top kick returner on the board, I'm suggesting that maybe Ayers could work into being a backup punt returner. He's definitely a kick returner. But it's a lot better than when all these kick return rules get changed. And we'll be talking about the rule changes here. I've been kind of kicking the can down the road to talk about that with all the draft coverage. But this isn't a Dree Archer pick because a 7th-round pick cost the Steelers nothing, particularly when they had a compensatory pick too. So they're allowed to make this. I can't even say it's a reach when it's in the 7th round. This makes sense. So if this kid fits into what the Steelers are looking to do, I really like this pick. Doesn't mean he's going to see the field much as a wide receiver. Got a lot of guys in front of him. You still have, aside from a suspended player who will be back next year, that'll have to compete for a roster spot for. You still have Sammy Coates, Darius Hayward-Bay, and of course the incumbents Marcus Wheaton and Antonio Brown. So at best, he's going to be the 5th guy off the chart. Probably not going to be any better than like a Shaq and Phillips or something as far as an actual wide receiver when we watch him in the preseason. But you know what? I like the thought process. We have a hole and we're going to fill it. So we have a hole. We need more options at offensive tackle, and we need another option as somebody who can be a returner. And with the only 2 offensive picks the Steelers make, they do that. So they get an insurance policy that might help them raise the bar to the next level. And like I said, the defense, highly productive guys. And these are guys that can help make those numbers for sacks and turnovers even better. Maybe they even score on defense, get that scoring defense up, because that's what really helped the Steelers. They get the most sacks last year since the last time they went to the Super Bowl. That's huge. This defense is on the rise. And like I said, low floor, high ceiling. Very excited. Call me a homer. I like Kevin Colbert's draft picks. I'm very excited to see how these kids play upcoming in 2016. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. I appreciate you. If you like the show, of course, please head on over to your favorite podcast provider, whether that be iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, or TuneIn. Give us a review and rating. I look forward to reading those. And of course, for those of you who are commenting and subscribing over on YouTube, listening to this podcast, hey, thank you for all the likes. Thank you for all the comments. I try to keep up as much as I can and respond to those who do leave comments. As always, be good and go Steelers.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.